Let me set the scene for you. The lights in the cinema go dark. This soundtrack starts playing. Blizzard Entertainment, along with X Movie Film Studio, presents. Panning in and out of the darkness is a shot gradually zooming in to the frozen throne. The title, Warcraft, and Arthas appear on screen, followed by a text on the bottom that says, The Rise of the Lich King. The shot of the throne transitions to the rolling green hills of Lordaeron, camera moving through the trees, making its way to the capital city of Lordaeron. On the way, Arthas Menethil can be heard saying, My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name, Arthas. The shot ends by zooming into a lone tower in the capital city, where a baby can be heard crying. Arthas is born. The cinema erupts in applause, even though all they've seen are the title credits. There are grown men in the back row crying. There's somebody in the audience texting their ex. The entire room is sharing in this euphoric, emotional moment. Chicken Jockey pales in comparison to the energy that was just created here. And you know what? Blizzard, and whoever else was in charge of making decisions, said, No. Let's instead make something totally mediocre, a story that only a specific chunk of our audience will understand, and that will bring no new interest to the Warcraft universe. And thus, the Warcraft movie was born. This is one of those things that makes me really angry. How could the bag be fumbled so badly here? You're literally sitting on one of the most captivating and powerful stories ever told in gaming. There's a bar that was set here, and I'm not just talking about World of Warcraft being regarded as the best MMORPG in existence, or the fact that Blizzard's game cinematics were always considered to be unmatched in quality, but it's about the very heart and soul of excellent, world-class storytelling, completely disregarded for what? A passion project? An experiment? Today you guys are going to be watching me absolutely lose my mind over Blizzard's biggest missed opportunity, or their biggest mistake. I'm going to discuss why the Warcraft movie should have been based on the story of Arthas Menethil, how they could implement it into a possible trilogy or even series, and what the overall impact of this would be, not just for fans of the Warcraft universe, but for people beyond that, who would in turn become interested in one of our favorite game franchises. And if you think I'm not serious enough about this, I bought a whiteboard for this. So first of all, what was the main issue with the Warcraft movie that they did make? They chose to base it on the original Warcraft game, the first war between the orcs from Draenor and the humans when they invaded Azeroth. This is a rather complicated event with a lot of moving parts and concepts that aren't going to be understood very well by the average viewer or somebody who doesn't have knowledge of the lore. It is an important event, but it's not one that immediately comes to mind for Warcraft fans when they're asked about the lore, or the Warcraft universe in general. I personally did sort of enjoy it. I thought it was fine. Bobby Kotick recently said that it was one of the worst movies that he'd ever seen. I wouldn't go that far, but it was very, very mediocre. And mediocre is not what Blizzard built its reputation on. So, how would movies based on the Lich King be infinitely better? Arthas is one of the greatest villains, not just in the Warcraft universe, but in fantasy in general. His story is dark, compelling, and utterly heartbreaking. There's an angle here that I can see going far beyond the Warcraft fandom, to where his story would touch the hearts and minds of people who don't even play video games. Now maybe they will choose to do this, who knows? Life is long and full of surprises. Maybe they will decide to finally close the fridge door on all of the L's that they've taken in the past decade and have a proper return to peak Blizzard. And if they do, their work is cut out for them, sure, but they already have the bones and I would say most of the flesh that would make up the movies, meaning that in reality, most of the work is already done. Arthas is a character that we are introduced to in Warcraft 3, The Reign of Chaos. He is somebody that has shaped much of the Azeroth that we know from the start of the MMORPG, World of Warcraft. He was so much more than just a villain that sat in a tall tower and posed a threat to the entire world just because. He was an unholy force of nature, a formidable entity who brought about death and decay to even the most sacred of places. The Lich King is a story that's far bigger than Azeroth and also all of the specific things that people who played the game know about. It's a story with the power to influence culture and fantasy as a genre. And to understand why I say this, we need to go back to the beginning. The birth of Arthas Menethil. In structuring a sort of a timeline here, let's say that we're doing this for a trilogy, just for the purpose of this video. And I will be basing this on what we see in game, as well as the added context from the book Arthas, The Rise of the Lich King by Christie Golden. I only just recently read this now in preparation for this video, and I have to say that this really seals the deal for me. It's what makes me even angrier that this wasn't done sooner. The book provides much needed context on Arthas's youth and background prior to the events of the games, and it adds details in between that give a lot more depth to the story if we're looking at it in the context of putting this on the big screen. Several years before the start of the First War, Arthas Menethil is born to King Arthas Menethil and Queen Liane Menethil. We should have focus on the events that shaped his early childhood, such as the birth of his horse Invincible at the Balnir farmstead. This is something that he was present for, that he witnessed, and this is going to be very important. In the book, we learn that he was very kind as a young boy. Even though he was royalty, he liked to hang out with the commoners, he was kind to all of his subjects. The first kind of shocking event that occurs in his early life is when he learns that Stormwind has fallen. He meets Prince Varian Wrynn, who is pretty much the same age as him, and at this point, because Stormwind fell, he actually became the king. Around this same point in the timeline, he will also get to meet Lady Jaina Proudmoore. In the beginning, we'll have a chance to explore all of these developing relationships, his training with Varian, Uther, and Muradin Bronzebeard, and of course his relationship with Uther the Lightbringer and his own father, Arthas Menethil. I think that there's a great opportunity in the first movie to really show the lavish side of Lordaeron, the beauty of the capital, the magnificent Dalaran, very bright and detailed costumes, a fantasy world that you yourself would want to live in because everything just looks so beautiful. Like we said already, in his youth he meets Lady Jaina Proudmoore, who will be one of the most important characters in this entire story. Everyone loves a good love story. It's something that people will often look for no matter what they're watching, and it's an element of his life that further augments the real tragedy of his downfall. The first movie would be where their relationship blossoms from a fleeting smile across the room to becoming lovers. The love connection that Arthas has with Jaina is a sort of a line to follow for the entirety of the trilogy or the series. We're looking at something that could potentially offer a lot of really juicy twists like jealousy, but overall the formation of a deep and seemingly unbreakable bond. Equally as important, however, will be the death of Invincible, his horse. An accident that was totally preventable, for which Arthas forever felt guilty. He went riding in unsuitable weather, which resulted in the horse breaking its forelegs, so he had to put it out of his misery himself. He regarded this as his biggest failure, but it was also the thing that made him vow to protect and make sacrifices for the welfare of others, whatever it took. Invincible is then buried at the Balnir farmstead where he was born. But it isn't all doom and gloom. We will focus on positive events in his life as well, such as becoming a paladin of the Silver Hand. Like I said, again, the beginning of his courtship with Jaina, which was official, his treatment of his men, and just him being a kind and righteous prince. He does eventually back away from his relationship with Jaina, says that she should focus on her studies in magic, and he in his training as a paladin. Fast forward. We have the news of a plague that is spreading. This is where he is reunited with Jaina and they are sent to investigate it together. From here we should see a breakdown of the almost idyllic world and kingdom that they live in, how luscious green grass and lively villages turn to undeath, the vile and ugly transformation of Lordaeron. We will have a sort of a crescendo, be shown just how out of control the situation in Lordaeron is getting, with the plague and the blighted grain. How futile all efforts seem. The initial killing of Kel'Thuzad doesn't change anything, and along the way, Arthas begins to spiral and he grows more angry and frustrated with the entire situation. In what seems to be his worst and most hopeless moment, after he has faced enough of the undead to know that the situation has gone too far, he has a brief romantic reconnection with Jaina, where there will be positive thoughts regarding the future and how they will get married and everything will be okay. And then they reach Stratholme. This entire city must be purged. Here I just want to say that in terms of content and the angle that they choose when it comes to presenting everything, I actually think that this particular story would benefit a lot from being targeted towards a more mature audience rather than a family-friendly fantasy movie. I think this just requires the level of grit that we saw in Game of Thrones back when Game of Thrones was at its peak to really make viewers come face to face with the harsh truth here, while also having that degree of fantasy in a sort of a Lord of the Rings way. Stratholme at this point needs to be a very painful moment for the viewers. This is where relationships start to break down. This is where we see Arthas at this point at his worst. It is one of the most controversial parts of his story. You will still have people arguing about whether or not he did the right thing here, people that consider his motivations against the backdrop of the kind of person that he was up to this point. But the fact is, he marched into Stratholme with his men, the people of the city recognized the banners as their protectors, and they did not expect to be slaughtered by them. Every man, woman, and child in Stratholme was killed. By the time they got to Stratholme, all of the grain was already distributed, and Arthas had already seen the effects of consuming this grain and what it turned people into. His logic was that if it happened to him, he would rather die as a person of sound mind without becoming this horrible, mindless monstrosity. The viewers will be questioning the morals here. Maybe not even in the moment that it happens on screen. Of course, Arthas will be justifying it with what we mentioned earlier, but he will feel betrayed by Uther and Jaina, who were against this idea and left him there. I'm sorry, Arthas, I can't watch you do this. Now he also meets Mal'Ganis here, and with the shock of the introduction of this demonic figure, perhaps there will be less of a focus on what exactly Arthas is doing and more of a focus on the fact that there is a demon in the city. But it will need to hit hard with the aftermath. The city destroyed, piles of corpses. We are talking Game of Thrones level of drama here, stuff that will make viewers question everything that they understood about this world and the characters. It's insane. The first movie should also deal with his expedition to Northrend and how he follows Mal'Ganis there. How he gradually becomes more and more consumed with rage, to the point that he isn't just a prince who cares for his people, but he uses deception to reach his goal. There's a situation that unfolds when he is in Northrend, where he meets up with Moradin Bronzebeard and they begin their joint search for Frostmourne to defeat Mal'Ganis. He is called back to Lordaeron by his father the king, and his men begin to make their way to the shore to leave without him on the ships. He hires mercenaries, burns down the ships to prevent his men from leaving, and then blames the mercenaries. Look what they did, let's kill them for it. Everything here will lead up to him actually getting the Frostmourne. Moradin Bronzebeard will unfortunately die in the process. But with the Frostmourne in hand, he will finally defeat Mal'Ganis. The ending of the movie should feature his triumphant return to Lordaeron, where he is greeted by crowds of cheering civilians, people praising their prince's bravery and conviction. Arthas' dramatic entrance to the throne room. He is changed now. His hair went from golden blonde to white. He is pale, his features are rough, and there's a brutality about him. And then we get to this iconic scene.
What is this? What are you doing, my son?
Succeeding you, father.
This kingdom shall fall, and from the ashes shall arise a new order that will shake the very foundations of the world.
The first movie will end with the camera zooming out of the capital city. The cheers will turn to screams as Arthas bids his new followers to kill everyone there. Smoke blazes, the sky darkens, and so too does the screen, and then the credits, to be continued. Why? Why could we not have had this? The soundtrack is right there. The story is already written. I didn't make any of this up. This is already there. Looking at the second and third installments in this trilogy, we can possibly allow for some creative liberties here and there. Now, the second is still a lot more linear, as you can see from all of this. We focus on Arthas making use of his new powers as a Death Knight, wielding the Frostmourne. If the last movie ends with a massacre of the capital city, the second should begin with a familiar location, the Balnir farmstead. Except here, Arthas will be a young boy, witnessing the birth of his steed, Invincible. Just as the little horse is born, and he looks into its eyes lovingly, he blinks. And now he is covered in snow, and there lies Invincible, waiting to be put out of its misery because of the accident, followed by its burial at the Balnear farmstead where he was headed when the incident occurred. Then we flash to present time, and Arthas unearths Invincible, now but a skeleton of its magnificent former self, and brings it back to life, or on death with his new powers. The horse will continuously bring him back to the past. As the movie unfolds and he commits various atrocities, the dwindling humanity at the back of his mind will be brought forward because of Invincible, who will remind him of Jaina and his father and his youth. There's a few key things that need to happen here at the beginning. So regarding the resurrection of Kel'Thuzad, a special urn was needed to carry Kel'Thuzad to the Sunwell. We find out that this urn is actually carrying the ashes of Arthas' father, and it can only be obtained by killing Uther. As commanded by a dreadlord, he must seize the urn for himself and place the remnants of Kel'Thuzad inside, if he is to make it to the Sunwell for his resurrection. An epic battle between Uther and his former apprentice Arthas ensues. This will be emotional, a lot of flashbacks to his early training and youth, and then he kills Uther. Moving on, we will have the sacking of Silvermoon and the introduction of another key character, Sylvanas. Long story short, we should see whatever way they adapt Arthas moving up through Eversong Woods, the creation of the Dead Scar, and the turning of Sylvanas into a Banshee, a fate that she fought very hard to escape. Then there is the fight at Quel'Thalas to get to the Sunwell, where he kills the Elven King, and finally Kel'Thuzad materializes again as a Lich. This whole time we are slowly learning that Arthas is just a pawn, a part of a bigger plan by the Burning Legion, something that Kel'Thuzad is secretly warning him of, even prior to his materialization. Arthas at this point is also hearing the voice of the Lich King inside his head, so we get to see that particular unholy connection forming. The destruction of Dalaran will be the next key event, with the summoning of Archimonde that occurred prior. Arthas will kill Antonidas, who was the former master of his love, Jaina, and once Archimonde is finally out and about in Azeroth, Arthas is faced with the fact that he was being used this whole time. However, Kel'Thuzad assures him that he is part of a bigger, darker plan involving the freeing of the Lich King from his icy tomb. He becomes tired of doing the bidding of demon lords who openly say that they no longer need him, and then we meet Illidan Stormrage, a night elf who is tasked with killing one of the demons, and in turn he can keep a powerful artifact, the Skull of Gul'dan, for himself. There's going to be a close call after Sylvanas convenes with the demons and goes to betray Arthas. She regains her physical form and almost kills him. After this, he'll escape with the help of his army and Kel'Thuzad, and they will go back to Northrend. A lot of chaos will unfold in Northrend. I think that this is a place where some creative freedoms can be permitted, again staying with the key events of what's actually going on. There is something of a confrontation with Kael'thas at that point, and there is of course the introduction of the Nerubians who will accompany Arthas and take him through their ancient city as kind of a shortcut so that he makes it in time to the Frozen Throne to kind of get in front of Illidan, who's already there and posing a threat to the Lich King. Once we're there, a battle between Arthas and Illidan ensues. Arthas will defeat Illidan, and we finally get the ascent of the Frozen Throne, where he will don the armor of the Lich King, and he and Ner'zhul will become one. Arthas becomes the Lich King. What little humanity that was left within Arthas that we had observed during some of the terrible moments in this movie would now truly be gone, and all he is now is the Lich King. You'll have the final shot of the movie zooming into the Frozen Throne, where his glowing blue eyes shoot open. Now, the third movie is probably where we would get the most creative freedom. The thing is, the events that would occur at this point aren't as linear as what happened in Warcraft 3, because of course now we're getting into the world of Warcraft. Now, I say creative freedom provided that we're still sticking to the important events that led to Arthas' fall at Icecrown Citadel. This would have a focus on Arthas and his continued atrocities, the goings-on in New Avalon, the Ebon Hold where you start as a Death Knight in World of Warcraft, and the Battle for Light's Hope Chapel, which I think should be kind of blown to look a lot bigger than what it looked like in the MMO. We should see a focus shift a little to Tyrion Fordring, the paladin who will lead the attack on Arthas at the end of the movie. We can have freedom for some new key main characters here in terms of who the player character placeholders will be, those that will be present in Icecrown Citadel when Arthas falls. And this part of the trilogy should also have a focus on Sylvanas and Jaina. A kind of a parallel where one of them is consumed with her hatred for Arthas and determined to end him, and the other still foolishly believes that there is some humanity still left there, that he is still her Arthas and that maybe she could talk some sense into him. And that is how I think the movies, or maybe series, should be structured. I could see HBO having a go at this. I can see this having the popularity that Game of Thrones had in its peak. Of course, there is a right and a wrong way to do things, but so much is already done for them. And unlike Game of Thrones, this is a story that actually already has an ending. There is a ton of material to work with. When you make something like this that is supposed to appeal to audiences beyond just people who play games, there is huge potential for a wide cultural impact. Something that no new expansion or recycled classic server could do at this point, unless they really work on a proper Classic Plus. This story has the potential to be far-reaching and to revive Blizzard's reputation, at least in terms of legacy content and the storytelling, things that at this point are majorly forgotten by players. The marketing for this would be so easy. All of the merch with like the iconic symbols and Frostmourne and quotes and a lot of things that they wouldn't even have to spend money on. I guarantee you that some 15-year-old girl in her bedroom will be making TikTok edits of Arthas and Jaina to Taylor Swift songs, single-handedly surpassing the efforts that any in-house marketing team could make. As a former 15-year-old girl, I know what I'm talking about. And when it comes to fantasy, sure, you can drop viewers into this very elaborate, alien world that has tons of baggage in terms of lore and things that you need to know and understand in order to fully understand it and enjoy it. Something that's really specific and only really appealing if you know what you're watching. Or you could use a human, relatable element to introduce the fantasy. A prince born in a kingdom that resembles some place in our real world. The medieval vibes, getting all the history nerds into it because of the aesthetic, giving us something that everyone will understand even if they have zero knowledge of Warcraft. A story of a young prince who grows up and slowly succumbs to corruption, first as a pawn in a bigger game, but eventually outgrowing what we thought was the true evil in this world and becoming something infinitely more terrifying and monstrous. It's very compelling, easy to get into and follow, and a great way to introduce Azeroth with all of its fantastical elements that are otherwise alien to the average viewer. I'm entirely convinced that this would be a massive hit. Few things are as hit or miss in this world as movies based on games. And if we're really honest with ourselves, it's mostly miss. But it's always kind of a bummer being a fan of like a big game franchise and seeing it become successful to the point that they want to put it on the big screen, only to then see it fail as a result of poor writing and just a general disconnect with both existing fans and potential new ones. The Assassin's Creed movie, for example, I was so excited for that. I saw the cast, it sounded amazing. I went to see this disaster in the cinema and I couldn't even gaslight myself into thinking that it was halfway decent. Over the years, we've seen tons of really terrible and mediocre movies based on fantastic, legendary games and game franchises. For the record, I don't want to say that the Warcraft movie is terrible. It wasn't. But it wasn't even a third of the true potential that we can see come from Blizzard's classic storytelling. What are you waiting for, Blizzard? Henry Cavill is already too old to play Arthas. That would have been great, but that ship has sailed. This is like getting the winning numbers on a lottery ticket and then just refusing to cash it in because you're too lazy to go to the shop. We're looking at something that would cause an aftermath in the movie theaters that would rival that of the Minecraft movie or even 50 Shades. Now, if this does end up happening, and I'm addressing whatever movie studio ends up being in charge here, I would love to be a part of this. I will be human commoner number 4 in Stratholme. I have credentials, I was in a movie with a speaking part, so there's that. Do it and hire me. And that's about it for this video. Please make sure to send it to your local Chris Metzen. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. As always, huge shout out to my channel members. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all in the next video. Be seeing you. Bye! And then we flash to present time, and Arthas unearths invisible. Invisible.